Hey everybody, I'm Jennifer. I'm a very grateful alcoholic. And as I always am when I speak, I'm nervous, but I'm honored and honored to be your friend, Stephen, honored to be considered for such an important group to speak here. Stephen and I were talking a little bit about the last time I spoke, and it's the beauty of this thing of how sobriety moves through our lives. It was a really difficult time. And as all those times have been, those dark nights of the soul, I am forever changed by it and forever grateful for the pain and the beauty and the love. So the story I told then has been sprinkled with the beauty of all things of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm going to start with a couple of things that my sponsor always taught me to say when I'm speaking. My first is that I'm Jennifer, I'm an alcoholic. The second is my sobriety date, which is July 6, 1987. And then I'm to read something that kind of settles me from the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is from the back part of the book, the stories. Can you guys hear me okay, first of all? Thumbs up. Yeah, cool. All right, this is from the story, My Chance to Live. And it really does describe what it was like when I got here. I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous at age 17, a walking contradiction. On the outside, I was the portrait of a rebellious teenager with miles of attitude to spare. On the inside, I was suicidal, bloodied, and beaten. My stride spoke of a confidence I didn't feel. My dress was that of a street tough kid you didn't want to mess with. But inside, I was trembling with fear that somebody would see through my defenses to the real me. If you saw who I really was, you would turn away in disgust or use my many weaknesses to destroy me. One way or the other, I was convinced I'd be hurt. I couldn't allow that to happen, so I kept the real me veiled behind the force field of a rough-edged attitude. And this part is the line that really speaks to me the most. How I got to this place is still a mystery to me. And I think that can be said about how I landed into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and about where I sit today. It's just a mystery. All of it to me. When I got here, I was severed. I was torn from myself. It was from love. I felt none of that. And then I was found. It was like this miraculous thing where I just ended up in treatment. On July 6, 1987, I walked through the doors and like right downstairs to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But that's not, for me, it didn't just turn on, right? I needed some time. There's no way I felt like what I had done and what I had seen could ever live inside a whole person. I just didn't believe I could get sober. I stayed sober, luckily, thankfully, beautifully through the experience of AA, through a really frightening time. I tried to convince myself over and over again that I couldn't do this thing, that all of y'all were too beautiful, too clean to host somebody like me in your lives. And I found that the service of Alcoholics Anonymous taught me otherwise. And there were days when I stood outside of the restaurants that we were meeting at after meetings and just felt too dirty to walk in. There were also times when I stood at the door of the restaurants that we were going in and judged you. Like we went to a Denny's on a Friday night, often for my home group, and I just thought, God, what a bunch of losers. But once inside a Denny's, I didn't know how to eat, how to be, until a newcomer would show up. And then I had a sister or a brother or a litter mate that I could just feel the same kind of feelings with. And so I very quickly connected with those around me. And one of them is on the meeting today, somebody that I got sober with that I love very much. And we've been able to stay sober together through this whole experience and stay the best of friends. So what's hard about speaking for me is I don't even know that there have been words created to describe the beauty that this program has given me. I don't know if they're very shy words. They're hard, it's hard to put into a chronological order of what it's been like to be on this journey. But I can tell you if you're new, I can tell you if you feel like I felt, this program will envelop you until you can believe in it yourself. And then when you get to the place where I believed in it myself, or you believe in it yourself, you'll be awestruck by it. It's just the way the miracles show up, the way people show up, the way love shows up. I was thinking, and I can't remember the name of who was talking about somebody that she worked with, that she loved, that just recently passed. And I was thinking before I spoke about this young man named Jeremy, who I loved very much. And he just, I couldn't hold on to it, and he was just too gentle of a soul to live in the world of using. And so when he passed, it was just tragic for his family and for everybody. And years later, I was in the middle of kind of the experience I showed up for here. I was in the middle of the divorce. So whatever that was, 30 years sober, 29 years sober, whatever. And I went for an afternoon run. I never go for an afternoon run. And I was running and I saw this bench and there was a sunflower on the bench. And I love Vincent van Gogh. It's a whole other story. So I was drawn to it and I walked up to it, and it was his bench. It was dedicated to him. I had no idea there was such a thing. And there it was. And as I was running, I was considering I should just quit my job. I'm not connected enough to the good in it all to be trying to give it away. I work in the industry of recovery and mental illness. And I was just contemplating all of it. And there he was to tell me he loved me. And so I just sat and I wept at that sight. And behind me, I could feel two people walking up. And the man said, "Be quiet, I don't want to disturb her." And it was his parents. And I couldn't believe it. And I just knew from the other side, I knew from this side, I knew love. And that story, as I was just thinking of it today, is how this whole deal shows up for me. The mystical God as I understand him, people who have walked through exquisite pain, who are like they just hug me. I'm just so grateful for all of it. So as we've heard, and as our stories go, the person that walked into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 18. I was deaf to love and to you, but all of a sudden my hearing was turned on. And so it was garbled, and it was miraculous. And I went to treatment, and I stayed in treatment for about 2 years. And that whole time, I needed that experience. I needed to stay to meet Julie. I needed to stay to heal. I needed to stay for other people's work. I needed to stay to get kicked out and get sent to a homeless shelter for a couple months. But you see, there was something else that happened during that time that now I look back at and I realize, I guess it was the only language I could hear, because it wasn't all love. It was a very difficult place. They were very hard and highly confrontational. And they spoke to me in a language, I guess, that I was used to. Told me things like I was just a whore on the street without AA, and that I should never expect to be anything more than possibly a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, who sort of groveled at the gratitude of that. And I don't know that that's what they said. It sure sounded like what they were saying. But I was held sort of in purgatory to get through it, to get sober, to start to believe that what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is the opportunity, the chances to uncover and discover who I am, who you are, to never be able to understand who God is, but to constantly be hungry to. I don't know who God is, but I have certainly known him. He has shown up for me. My God is, for whatever reason, shows up with that pronoun. And that's, I'm sure, limiting, but that's all my human mind can fathom. There's so much to fathom of it all. So I got through that time, and I started working the steps. And I think I can take the rest of this talk, and it might go kind of back and forth, but through the journey of the steps. That first step that was told to me through the eyes of my second step, right? I was restored to sanity, and then I could see what had happened. And kind of immediately what I saw was, I can't stay sober because I keep convincing myself to drink and use despite negative consequences. I heard Clancy say one time, I can't drink successfully and I'll always think I can. And I saw that. I knew that. And I just didn't know enough to know that there was something in place that could hold me during those times when I would forget again. And so I saw how powerful the disease was. So that first bit of my sobriety, that first experience, was to be able to see the power of what more about alcoholism drives, the alcoholic mind. How stone cold sober I could think the most insane thoughts. And but what was happening was I was able to hear them, and then I was able to tell you. And I was talking the other day to some people, and I talked about how the using thoughts are to be expected. If I'm an alcoholic, I will constantly have these intrusive thoughts, but so it's not those that are to be feared. It's if I don't tell you, that's when I'm in trouble. And literally the next day, which was last week, literally the next day I was on an airplane, and the guy next to me ordered a can of Chardonnay. A can of Chardonnay. And I thought, well, I could do that. And then I immediately thought, after having just said that, well, I don't need to tell anybody that. Then I laughed out loud at the insanity of that. Not the insanity of the can of Chardonnay, because that's just crazy. But I immediately started to text people and just say, I just need to say it out loud. I just thought I could have a can of Chardonnay. I didn't even drink wine when I was using, let alone like what a classy way to relapse. And I thought I didn't need to tell. And so that first year was just sort of needing that information into my soul, that I needed you to hear my insanity, that I needed God to give me the truth, that step 2 wasn't about me figuring out God. It was about knowing I needed to be restored to sanity, and expecting a miracle. And it took a while for that part of step 2 to really land inside of my soul, to expect a miracle, to have hope. And hindsight is where I found that had happened for me, and I'm sure that that's been the case for you. I just started telling on my disease, and I just got invited closer into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through doing that. And then, as I said, I got kicked out because one of the rules of the treatment center that I went to was to stay out of relationships with men. And so, of course, when I met him, the man of my dreams, he had a girlfriend, was a drug dealer, hated his dad. He was perfect. And so off into the woods I ran with this boy. And I remember, kind of in the middle of the whole situation that one gets involved with in the woods, I remember he said to me, "I love you, Jennifer." And I said, "I love you too." And I couldn't remember his name. And I hit like another bottom of, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be somebody that gives away something so sacred, just all of me. I didn't know how to get out of the woods without continuing to be that person. And I didn't know how to tell the truth right away. But when I was asked enough times, I told. And they kicked me out. And I got super pissed because I thought, you can't kick me out for telling the truth. And they said sort of the obvious, we didn't kick you out for telling the truth. We kicked you out for breaking the rules. A really important lesson for me, because all of the spiritual work that I started to do in early recovery, there was a pain that came with it. There was a knowing that just sort of seared a little bit, that branded in me. And I would get angry every time, like, what am I doing if this isn't, if I have to hurt? And the truth will set you free. it just hurts really bad getting there. And so I went off. I remember they gave me the option to go to the mission. And this is when I first experienced step 3. And I tell this in my story every time because it was the closest I think I'd come to a knowing at that time. I was leaning up against a tree and I can still feel the bark on my back. I was 19 years old and I was trying to decide what to do, and I knew I had to go. And I demonstrated my decision, and I went to the homeless shelter. And my life changed. At that moment is where I turned my life over to a power greater than myself. At that moment, I demonstrated my decision. At that moment, God started showing up in those women who were so broken and so beautiful all at the same time, and they loved me, and I let them love me, and I softened. I stopped going to meetings and I started reading the Bible, and then I believed I was Jesus's wife. So I would also say I got a little psychotic, just a smidge. That's what happens to me when I stop doing the deal, right? I have to treat my alcoholism. I'm one of those alcoholics that when I don't treat my alcoholism, the progression of my disease shows up. And I don't need to be drinking to see the progression of my disease. I just need to not treat it. And it happened really quickly. So I called my sponsor just to let her know, who my husband was. And she just was like, holy shit, like, no. So she directed me back to the big book and to call her. And luckily I believed her. And so when I got out of there, I actually, backing up again, I did my first 4-step in 30-day treatment. And that was important because I had a secret. I had a secret that I wasn't going to tell you. I had a secret that made me a horrible person. I had a secret, a lie that was so vicious. And the only reason I told the lie was so my boyfriend would stop being mad at me. And I tell this now, not for the shock value of it, but this is what had become. But I told my family and anyone that would listen that I was raped by my sister's husband, and I wasn't. I slept with him, but I was not raped by him. And nobody went to my sister's wedding. Nobody was there for my sister when her first baby was born, and she almost died in childbirth. I made them choose me. That's how angry and bitter I was. And so it was in my first 4-step that I told the truth. And it was at that moment that I got to experience the power of the 5th step. Because my sponsor didn't just say, oh, I've done worse than that. She heard it, and she said, that's not the woman you want to be. And we have a program that can help you get through this. We have steps for this. But it's not looking good for you if you keep drinking. She took it seriously because it was serious. It was a lie that I'd gotten into so deep I couldn't find my way out of it. So I started telling the truth as often as I could. Fast forwarding, because this isn't really a timeline as much as it is about the steps and when they've had an impact on me. Since that time, I've done a lot of 4th and 5th steps. And I have to, because what it means to not treat my alcoholism changes on a regular basis. And I go into resentments, or I go into fear. And it isn't just going to meetings and just, doing the routine of recovery that keeps my alcoholism and my spiritual yearning cared for. It's attending to the human that I am today and the truth of today. And so sometimes that means I need right? I need therapy. I need a different set of eyes on me. I need more time with God. Most recently, I had a traumatic brain injury. And I was telling Stephen before we started, somebody asked me, what do you think caused it? And it's still a mystery what happened. I fell, and I said, I think what caused it is not doing what I've had to do to cure it. I wasn't healing in ways that medicine can heal you, through acupuncture, through the loving touch of cranial work. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't feeding my body, my mind. I wasn't keeping stress at bay. And all of those things have healed. I had an IQ of 80 when this happened. I couldn't drive for 7 months, and I have healed. I've been healed, and there's still things that I have to maneuver. But what could have happened to me and where I sit today is miraculous. And I can't even understand it. So those fourth and fifth steps throughout my whole sobriety I found, actually, when I was, this isn't because I haven't opened my big book in a long time, but I don't know where this was in my big book, but I found this thing, and it's from a fifth step with my sponsor probably 20 years ago. And it has words on it like, I'm ambitious, but I have high expectations and low self-confidence. I have lacked the confidence to carry ambitions peacefully. I have self-loathing. My ego is afraid I can't do things, and my soul's afraid I can't deal with it. This is the kind of thing that I have had the sponsorship to hear. Not quite what I heard in my first step, and not quite what I've heard in my last one, but as meaningful as it could possibly be at the time. And so that takes me to like what I've experienced with step 6 and 7, my favorite steps. Oh my God, they're so raw and beautiful. When I first got sober, 6 and 7 was simply finishing a fifth step, going home and trying not to fall asleep, and taking the book off taking the book off the shelf and making sure I told the whole truth, and then just saying the 7-step prayer. And I was missing the whole deal with it. And it wasn't until I had about 17 years, and I went through a breakup with my ex-husband, and we later got back together again, and then recently have divorced. But I loved him very much, and he loved me. And I knew something was not right for us. And so I left, and just got off track, right? Just got off track with what love meant and who I was. And I remember falling to my knees and beating my bed and screaming to God, you have to help me. Oh my God, I was in so much pain. And then I remember another time in my car, just beating on the steering wheel in the pouring rain, just begging God to help me know what to do. And my husband showed up in the rain, and we were just so broken, and we just loved each other through it, as love can do. And but you all love me. I remember going to meetings, and I couldn't even hear how it works read without sobbing. There was this guy in my home group, his name was Jan, and he was the hardest, meanest dude ever. He had super long hair. Everybody was scared of him. And Jan sat next to me at every single meeting and didn't say a word. My God, I love the way we show up when it was like nothing I ever expected. And I would go into meetings with these older members of Alcoholics Anonymous, like 30 and 40 and 50 years, sitting on those little chairs, that we sometimes sit in the little kids' rooms in churches. And I would just cry. They didn't know what the hell to do with me. And they just would call me and ask me if I was okay. So I asked God, I begged God, and he did it. He gave me what I couldn't do myself, and then he gave me the strength to do what I could do. I humbly asked, and love showed up. that's the way I know how much I'm loved by God, my higher power. It's just astounding. And step 6 and 7 are like steps 1, 2, and 3 for me around my character defects and the ways that my instincts keep me from you and how powerless I am over them. And I need more light. I need more something to shine on me to tell me, like, what is it? Because I can justify away, or, you know, the darkness the doors I opened up when I got sober, they never quite shut. And I know how to do those things still. And now I have a choice to not do them. And step 6 and 7 are a part of that beauty. And then step 8, you know, that list of absolute cluelessness. How is it possible to be so clueless after having done such beautiful work? But I would write these lists of things I was going to say and how I was going to make amends, and my sponsor would just go through it with a marker, like, no, no, no. I had an amends to make, and I came to her with it. It was something I had done in sobriety, which the longer you're sober, the more your 8th and 9th step will be about your sober behavior. The tragedy is not facing that and not believing that we can still harm and hurt. The beauty is having a formula to walk through it. And so I'd written out the 8th step, and I just brought it to her, like, show me how to make this right. Show me how to do, like, this is what I think I should do. I'll do whatever you say. And she said, this one you can't make right. This one, your amends is to live with. And I was like, no, 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 no. Surely I can, like, you know, go like cuddle babies in the NICU. I can do anything. Just tell me what to do. Like, I'll mow his lawn for the rest of my life, whatever. And she said, no, this one you use to strengthen your character. And you make amends by being the person you would have liked to have been at that time. One of the hardest amends I've ever had to make. And I still have to work on that. I still try to be that person. And I mean, I think the first obvious amends that I had to make was to my sister. Well, actually, the amends as I thought was to be to my sister, but my grand sponsor, because my sponsor asked permission and went to my grand sponsor, and that's just another sort of beautiful thing that I've been taught, is if you don't know what to offer somebody, you can ask them to ask your sponsor. You can ask them to ask, but you always ask. And I've done that since. I don't have all the answers from my sponsees and for myself or anything. So she went to my grand sponsor and said, how does she, you know, what's the amends to her sister? And my grand sponsor said, the amends is to the man that she lied about. That's where it starts. And she told me exactly what I would say and what I wouldn't, and I would say nothing more, nothing less. And I was to say that I had lied, and that I would do what he needed me to do to make it right. But as it turned out, my sister came into town for a week before I was to see him. And so went back through the formula again with my sponsor, grand sponsor, and she told me what I was to say to my sister and exactly what I was to say. And I was to say, I'm not the sister that I would have ever wanted you to have or want to be. I know that now. I love you. And what I said didn't happen. I wasn't to tell her what did happen. I was to say it didn't happen. And she sat there and she cocked her head and she looked at me and she said, I love you. And I didn't know such a person existed. There are these consequences that we have from living in the dark, and the lack of ability to see the truth in the darkness. And at first it seems like the wreckage, like the obvious things, you know, like I had a 7th grade education, which I'd had, like I'd hurt my family, but who knew that I was going to find out that right under my nose was love. And she said, just stop saying it. And when I went to him, he said, just stop saying it. Just stop saying that I did it. And when asked, say I didn't. And I've done that since. Other amends have been, I think the most beautiful part of amends is that I've been granted the mercy of others. And it's freed me up to forgive the unforgivable that's happened to me in childhood. As somebody, as many of us have experienced, our childhoods come with much trauma, and mine did as well. And today I can honestly say, through really hard work with some incredible women of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd say the person that really helped me the most with this was Gay Gardner. She was my grant sponsor. She was very well known in the South. She was a trustee, and she passed, has since passed. And Gay heard my 5th step about the sexual abuse, and I would have never written it the way I'd written it if my sponsor told me I was going to have to read that to her. It's because she was a lady. She was a lady. And my 4th step had a lot of words. And I read it to her, and she said to me, this is where you move to the next steps, which separates the men from the boys. Can you forgive? Can you show mercy? Can you heal? You'll need help. You'll need therapy, which I've been in for a while. And today I can honestly say, and this isn't the truth it doesn't ever going to be the truth for everyone. We all have our own ways that we are healed. But love has been restored for me. I have boundaries, but I love this man. And he raised me. And I don't know why it happened, but I know I love him. And I have found my way through it. And that's where the big book is so beautiful, when it talks about we need outside help. And I've had and still have that. I remember wanting to be able to be forgiven. And he's never asked for forgiveness in the ways that I would have expected. But I know today who I am. It's just there's just not enough time to talk about that. My life, the 10th step of my life has been about noticing how I can disconnect from you, how I can just turn the knob and just be gone. How I can consider my needs before yours, and how I just have to keep admitting, and just be vulnerable. Show up at the last time when I spoke, just broken with very little hope. And I and the 10th step was the one step my sponsor let me do out of order, and I'm grateful for that. I was to read it well, it's actually the 11th step in the big book. I was to read every morning and every night. Still seems like a 10th step to me, but so I was allowed to do both of those out of one. So I want to talk about the sort of knowledge of his will, power to carry that out, and the ability to be of service, and just what the rest of my life has been like. I believed at my core that I was unteachable. I believed for years in this program that I was ignorant and that I couldn't be taught. And I really, honest to God, believe that what I saw in the 4-step, that I was using in my fear part of the inventory, that I was using all of these excuses to not go to school, that I'd never tried it sober, that I'd never tried it as a woman that I was. And so my husband at the time just drove me around the parking lot of a community college. And then he brought me in, and we walked around, and then we left. And then I decided to get all my documents, and I did. And they were right. I had a 7th grade education. I took the SAT and I got like a 500 on it. It was clearly I was uneducated. And so when I showed up with him to register, he left. And it was such a gift. He just said, "This is for you to do." And I registered, and I took 2 years of college that didn't count. It took me 8 years to get a bachelor's degree. I graduated from a well-esteemed university in Georgia, summa cum laude. I learned. And I'm not one of those miracles that can say, like, I found out I was brilliant. I found out I was a genius. Every class was hard. Every class. I even took in undergrad, in my associates, I had to take a weightlifting class. That was hard. And then I went on to get my graduate degree. Same thing, same fears. And I was able to do it, and graduated summa cum laude. It's a miracle. Something happened on one of my last days of graduate school. I got 100 in statistics. That's hard. And I walked out into my car, and I was amazed. I was just in complete awe. In the school that I'd been going to now for 4 years, I got in my car and I went to drive out, and I got lost in the parking lot. And it just was such a gift, right? Because I'm both of those people, right? I can't find my way out of a parking lot. I can't spell summa cum laude. I can't, but I have done the work, and I have earned the path. And there's some things that just can't be fixed. And I live with that, and I gratefully live with that. It's the resolve of regret, right? I'll never not regret what I did to my family, what I did to my mother by making her choose, the way I showed up to her in her darkness, by just the viciousness of my own anger. But today I have relationships of love and purpose, and I support my parents today in a lot of ways that it was not on my trajectory to be able to help my parents financially. And today I get to do that for all those days they did for me. And I get to travel, I get to love. And I loved my husband and I were married for 25 years, and we loved each other very much. And then the love shifted from the kind of love that I know that I want, from the way that life can burn for us. And I made a decision. And let me tell you, I can't imagine a harder way to leave somebody than to still love them. I wanted to be angry. I wanted it to be because he was all of these things, but that's not why. And so I was just burned with guilt, and I was brokenhearted for both of us, and both of our dogs died, and I gave him, the home we lived in. He got that. So I left everything, and I left town. Yeah. And I know with every fiber of my being, it was the right thing to do, and it was hard. And it can be looked at in a lot of ways, and I'm okay with that. We're good to each other today, and we're good apart, and we're right where we're supposed to be. And I fell in love again, and not just with the man that I'm with now, and I did fall deeply in love with him. I fell in love again, like with flowers and colors and humans and parts of me I didn't know I had. It's just this is that place I get to where there just aren't words that are born yet to describe how beautiful it is. To have this gift for as long as I've had it, to have been privileged with it, and I'm grateful. There's so many people on this meeting right now that I love. I've witnessed their miracles. They've brought miracles to me. I know love today, and I think it's like my superpower. I was raised around incredibly gifted people, and it turns out my gift is love, and I do that like from every fiber of my being. This formula of the 12 steps will uncover what you're meant to do, your profession, your life's work, the way you love your children, the way they love you back, the things you see. This formula of the steps is, I would say it's my greatest gift, but I think the greatest gift I have is that I know it's a gift. And I thank you for it. And I thank you for letting me be here to share. And I'm going to end with that.